And we're good. Okay. All right. Welcome to Rick, Rabbi, and Rashi.
Of course.
Trying to understand the Torah with Rashi and other commentaries. For the parsha of Tzav, which is the second parsha of the book of Leviticus. And just briefly, what it talks about is some extra details of the karbonis, of the offerings and sacrifices, animal sacrifices that were brought in the temple, in the tabernacle, as well as the week-long installation rites by which the priests, the Kohanim, the priests, were installed. Because, as they say, the joke, guy goes to his rabbi, rabbi, a wealthy businessman, he says, I want to be a Kohen, I'm willing to pay $50,000. So Rabbi says, you can't just become a Kohen. He says, Rabbi, I really, really want to be a Kohen. I'm willing to go $100,000. Can't just buy Kohen, right? He says, Rabbi, I'm going to give $10 million. I really want to be a Kohen. So Rabbi's like thinking, can he figure a way? Maybe. Tell me, why do you want to be a Kohen? He says, Kohen, why? Because my father was a Kohen, my grandfather, I want to be a Kohen too. But this is the original Aaron. How did he become a Kohen? All those people, Kohen, come from Aaron. But how was Aaron the first time installed? And how did God Shazam make him a Kohen? So that's what it talks about here, is the week-long procedures that God gave Moshe to install the Kohanim to be the spiritual representatives, the priests on behalf of the people. Okay, so let's get to it.
So if you didn't get into the couple of parshas before that, they just repeat it for you. So it's the rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. We keep doing the same thing over. I found this particular parsha sort of repetitive, but I did find a couple of little nuggets that we have talked about before we got on the air about what I thought was important, at least from my perspective. So if you want, I'll be glad to start.
I would love to hear, please.
Okay. First of all, I need to apologize to the audience. I had too much Purim. That's why I'm here on Monday as opposed to being here on Shabbat, prior to Shabbat. It was Purim was great. I love Purim. It's my favorite holiday. It's so joyous. We have a lot to be joyous about, and there's a lot of pain in the world. But anyways, to get to the questions in the parsha. So there's a lot of discussion about the fire never going out, removing the ashes, doing all the things to maintain the fire at the altar. And to me, those were just the words. What I'm really wondering is the people who the God who wrote this. What is the metaphor that he's trying to instill in us about the fire, about the never going out, the perpetual fire that exists? What is the metaphor for us as humans? Obviously, we're not godlike, that's for sure.
So interesting. Great question. There was a ner tamid or an eish tamid, a fire that could not go out on the pyre. I think in general, the flame is the metaphor for the soul. That's what we all know is the fall. In Judaism, especially if you look into Kabbalah and Hasidism, as I can't help but repeat Rabbi Steinsaltz's line to the New York Board of Rabbis, Kabbalah is the official theology of the Jewish people. So it's important to always go to that mysticism. But it's an easy metaphor, the flame is the soul. And in the soul, it's we have different parts of the soul. We have the divine soul. The divine soul is that part of the soul that's always just literally called the flame that's looking to go up to God. But our job is to make sure it's always burned. It's always, we have to fan it. How do you fan it? People always complain, I'm not inspired. I don't have faith. Yeah. And like any muscle, any internal part of our makeup, if you don't exercise it, it becomes dormant. And the divine soul, which is literally a spark of God, and it's like a flame trying to, it feels, it wants to leave this temporal world and connect to be part of the real oneness. But it can be very dormant, it can be very hidden. We have an obligation to make sure we're always feeding it with a little bit of fire. We can't just, take it for granted.
So that leads me to the next question, which is, do we need to sacrifice in order to keep the flame burning? Is that a requirement of us?
Good question. So just in the metaphor is that they kept it burning with wood. I mean, they brought sacrifice to burn, but
yeah.
I don't. It's a very wide term, sacrifice. To sacrifice.
Well, in other words, do we need to somehow limit our pleasure? I mean, there's some discussion about pleasure also in this parsha. Do we need to limit our pleasure to be able to keep that fire burning in some way? In other words, not to be. We talk about materialism early on in the Torah. In the portions that we've read before. Do we need to sort of limit that and sort of sacrifice ourselves in some way to keep the fire, because if you don't rake the ashes out, the fire gets dim. So I see it as sort of the metaphor is sort of we're raking the ashes, we're sacrificing, we're doing things.
As I say, Rick, you read the commentary of this particular chumash more thoroughly than I do, so you're ahead of me. That's kind of the industrial hazard of giving you access to my source material.
Sorry.
Occupational hazard of learning with you. But I'll tell you an interesting idea. And this is, the other booklet, the Chayenu, the booklet. So there it has the daily Tanya. Tanya, very seminal work of Hasidism, of Kabbalah. And right now in the daily cycle, where they're holding is chapter 37. And chapter 37 is 36 and 37 is to give a paradigm shift of what are we doing here? What's holy? What does God really want? And to sum it up, and this is, does God want a big idea of Tanya is you have a divine soul. It only wants divine stuff. It has no interest of anything physical, temporal, pleasure, ego. It's zero. It's against ego. It wants to leave ego. Then you have the animal soul, aka the vivifying soul, the soul that gives the survival instinct, the life force, and the drive for survival, which is inherently selfish. Perpetuate self, right? It's not bad. It's just so you have, let's call it the godly soul, and you have the animal soul, and there's a Zohar, there's a Kabbalah piece from the Zohar, the original mysticism in the 2,000 years ago. It says it quotes a line from, I think, Proverbs from King Solomon, that a wise man, his eyes should be in his head. And the question is, where else should they be? They should be on your head. Where else should eyeballs be? So he says, no. He gives a metaphor that the body is like a wick. The body / the body drive, the animal drive, which is if we have a body without a survival drive, we wouldn't survive. We have to. Right. So it's the metaphysical survival drive plus the body is like a wick. The Shechina, not the soul, the Shechina, God's presence, is called the flame. And the oil that is needed to bond wick with flame is mitzvahs, good deeds, Torah and mitzvahs. And, we have to start reading and we'll have another podcast on the Tanya, the daily Tanya. But what I want to point out here is that, therefore, it's saying that you want the Shechina, you want the fire. It's not talking about the soul. You want the revelation of the Shechina to be felt in the soul. Because the soul exists even if you do nothing. If you do 0 and you run away to the Himalayas, you still have a divine soul. It's just not activated. It's not getting oxygen, but it's still there. The Shechina means that you're giving that soul, the nutrients and its desired, its raison d'etre to what it really needs and wants. So, but it's funny that it says you need the oil, the mitzvahs, to keep it, the Shechina, the God's presence, on your body, on your head. That's what it means. The wise man's eyes are on what's on his head. It's very focused and conscious that I want the Shechina to be on my head. So I'm gonna do mitzvahs so I can have that constant fuel to fuse God's presence in my body. That's what.
So we confuse ourselves with the idea of eyes as seeing, as opposed to the concept that eyes are sort of the aura of which we accept.
The mental, we want your focus, your eyes, as in your focus, should be very punctilious and very concerned about what's on your head. Is it getting what it needs?
Interesting.
So the reason I noticed there's a lot more discussion, but one of the things is that the way the Shechina is through the body doing mitzvahs. It's not like, let's say you could ignore the body. You could be what sort of ascetic, someone who doesn't eat anything, a hermit, and just do spirituality the whole day and sort of ignore the body. And then, isn't that spiritual? Isn't that the ultimate? It says, no. You need to transform the wick has to burn to have the Shechina. I mean, without the body, which is the vehicle to do mitzvahs, you will not have Shechina. You will not have that surrender, nullifying, into the oneness experience.
It's sort of like a chemical reaction, right? You need the agent that causes the reaction. You can have the chemicals all there, but without the reagent that does the chemical, the catalyst that changes the character of it.
Right. Yeah. And what I just find so interesting is that it says us, your body's what's important.
Yeah.
Not that we ignore the divine soul. That's so important. It's such an important thing. But that's not why the soul came into this world, into a dungeon where it's in blinders and it has to have all the challenges of life. The divine soul was basking in the rays of God before. What does it need all this? It's only because through the chemical reaction of the body, the spiritual action of the body, burning, meaning not burning, consuming fuel, that you can have the light of God's presence. So you were saying before about not letting the light go out. I think it's, what was your question originally? It was about the fire and the altar not going out.
Right. In other words, you have to tend to the ashes. I mean, you can still, there'll always be a flame.
Exactly.
If you tend to the ashes, what happens is it dampens the flame. You want the flame to be large, right? I mean,
you want it, yes, exactly. Our goal is not to say as you know, a Chabad sort of mentality is, you don't have to do anything to be connected to God. Your soul is part of God. But it's going to be very dormant. It's going to be suffocating. It's going to be not, and even worse, it's not going to do it's not even about letting the soul feel free. The soul is here in all its challenges because the God, for some reason, wants the body to be sublimated, the body to be alight with fire. So if the soul doesn't do, what painful is? Imagine investing everything in your business, and you go and you're investing and success at hand, but whatever, the employees don't do it. And you're investing, and it's all for this, and it could happen, but it's just not happening. It's like, is it, I have my investments. It says, no, I don't even care. The initial investment wasn't the goal, was the profit. You don't just walk away net gain, net sum game. It's like the whole purpose of the profit of God making this world is that we should light up the body with fire, with spiritual fire, that the soul can't even do by itself. The soul just becomes the agent, the the helper, the tool, or whatever. So, like you said, you always have a soul. It's always there, but don't let it go out. You got to feed it because the soul wants to affect the body, and that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that idea. I love that metaphor. I think that's wonderful that we are able to it burns like a pilot light on
Exactly.
appliance.
Exactly.
But if you really wanted to have some koach, some strength,
fuel. Yes.
you have to let into it. You have to build.
That's I like that. But that's more simple than I was saying. We always have a pilot light. It's very special, very holy. Yeah. But we didn't buy an oven to have a pilot light on. We did to cook food. Yeah,
but I rather have my pilot light really moving. It's not so good than just a pilot light.
That's a great.
Anyway, I like that. We
can market that. We can make a Facebook meme with that.
All right,
Rabbi Rick Goldstein. Don't let the pilot light stay as is.
We could start a song. Don't let your pilot light go out. Right,
the pilot
song. Yeah. Right. We could. Why not? I think I own that one. Just so you know,
everybody saw it here.
All right. Okay. So the next thing that sort of troubled me a bit about this particular parsha is that not often does God do this, but instead of asking Moses to do something, he sort of commanded him. And he
someone's at my door. Do you mind pausing for 1 second?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. Very real life here, Okay. So the next question, yeah.
It's okay. I mean, they understand, believe me. So, like I was saying, that God doesn't often command. In other words, there's not like this ultimate imperative to talk to the Israelites about something or to tell them about the mitzvot or what God requires of them. But several times there are times when he does actually talk to God and talks to Moses and commands him to do things. This is one of the parshot that does that. And so I'm conflicted because I'm going back now in the previous parshot that we talked about. And there's a whole discussion about free will and the idea that we get to choose, and some things are predisposed for us, and that it's like there's a whole discussion about that, and yet it feels sort of autocratic, right? That at this moment God wants this to be done, and so therefore forget about your free will. This is how it has to. So tell me, how does this idea play into the whole idea of free will and predestination?
So it's a great question. Just so people realize, the name of the parsha again is Tzav, because the second verse says, God says to Moshe, command Aaron and his sons about so and so, like to do these whatever,
right?
Do the sacrifices, whatever. It's unique compared to most times God communicates to Moshe. The language is speak to the people, speak. While is somewhat direct, it is not as forceful. Command is a very forceful language. You better do this. It's urgent.
Yeah, he says, and I said to Moses, this God goes, and I said to Moses, right? And I said to Moses, right?
Exactly. So this is unique in communicating. When God communicates his will through Moshe, he doesn't usually say command, he says speak. And so what's command is very forceful. It sounds like you're taking away people's participation, you're forcing them. So what's interesting is that you mentioned before, the parsha is very bland. It's a lot of repetition, could have been just added on to a couple other parshas. We didn't have to have a separate one. And what's interesting is actually this answers that point, that it is a repetition. The installation rites were spoken about already, right. And the other,
the dress and the
tunic, the installation rites were spoken about in Exodus.
Yep.
And now it's just saying, now go do it. They did it. Now, like, again, you don't have to say in detail how they did it. You just say whatever God said they did now. As long as you said it once, you can just piggyback on that. So the repetition is actually repetition, but the tzav, the preface that has to be done in a way of command, where God's being sort of more forceful and urgent, is the main difference. It's the same, but now with a different flavor. Now it's a little more command, a little more urgency. And what this teaches us is action. So first of all, mitzvah means, the word mitzvah, really the best translation is commandment.
Right.
It means also connection, because the connection between us and God, colloquially used as good deed, but really mitzvah means commandment. So all mitzvahs are commandments. God's not like, he's not just asking, he's sort of commanding, but.
And he's obligating, right? I mean,
It's obligation, good word.
Obligation, right?
613 obligations, but the way God wants us to do the obligations is not in this miserable, forced way. He wants us obviously to buy into his agenda, because that's partnership. It's not where one's forced, it's really buying into the agenda. So when God tells the Jews, typically, while it's always a commandment, but it's speak it to them. Like, I don't want to emphasize I'm the big boss and you better. That's not the point. Okay, it's obligation, but let's focus more on the fact that you should get yourself to want to speak to them. Because God wants to come from us, even if we are obligated.
God wants to appeal to our better nature.
Exactly.
Right? You should be willing. You should be willing. It shouldn't be painful. It should be joyous.
Exactly. So it is a command, but let's not focus on. Let's focus on that it's what we really all both want. Mm-hmm. But there are a few exceptions where God says, this is a command. This is a command.
No.
And it's urgent. And I really need this. Like, I'm not commanding you because I'm just bored and I want to make you on a hamster wheel. Like, I really need this. I command, this is urgent. When the boss tells the employee, we need this. You must get this done. It's not out of just control. It's out of need. So, many times, certain mitzvahs are exceptions to the rule in certain ways, and they teach us general concepts on everything. That while God typically doesn't want to come away in this sort of forceful way, but at the same time, God does need it. So what do you do? When you want to commit to your children, something's really important, but you don't want to be forceful and have them rebel or become resentful. What do? You can't say everything you must, because that becomes burnout. At the same time, you say everything's up to you, maybe they won't get the idea. This is really important. So you say certain things are really important. You do command certain things, but not everything. So you mix it up. Some command, some better sense, speaking to the better senses. So this tzav is where God's saying, really, God needs you to do whatever he needs you. Because by you doing mitzvahs, you are going to bring world peace, spiritual harmony, Mashiach. That's how it happens. He needs you to be part of it. He can't do it himself. He set it up that he needs you to do it.
So he
doesn't want to force you. So he wants you to come along with your better senses. But sometimes we got to say, this is a need. This is an urgent need. You're commanded.
So I see it as nice to do and absolutely have to do. And the absolutely have to do is sort of the skeleton that we hang the rest of the nice to do's on.
Exactly. It becomes the background, hopeful impression on us that we realize this is all really important. God really needs us. This is an interesting question. Does God need us? That's an interesting question. Because some philosophies, even in Jewish religious philosophies, God doesn't need us. How could God? It's a problem to say God needs us. God is perfect and infinite. If you say he's needing, then he's not perfect. He's missing something. Right? That's the philosophical.
But we talked about the mirror a few parts showed before. We talked about the mirror. He creates us in his image, but remember, in his image, he's also looking back at us through the mirror, right? I mean, it's the idea that he's seeing himself in what we do and wants us to be sure.
But the question is, No, I agree. But a lot of the philosophers had a problem with saying God, it needs our mitzvahs. There's actually contradictions in Talmud. God doesn't need it. God does need it. Because you can think, if you say he needs it, it means he's lacking. And how could you say God, infinite oneness, is lacking? That becomes problematic.
So I don't think it's lacking. I think it's more affirmation, right? I mean, it's like what we do affirms already what exists, right?
I think it is. Well, I think it's affirming. I think it's also the way Hasidism, the Rebbe would explain it is that God chose to need this. Meaning, in theory, he doesn't need it, but he chose to need this. Yeah. The choice, that's kind of like bridges. So it's not like he's lacking. He didn't have to, but he chose to. Choice is free choice. Once he chooses, bottom line is he needs it. He chose to be in this predicament. So that's where our stuff matters. All right. Well,
I want to put in a plug for the Rebbe, not for the Rebbe himself, but I want to put in a plug for the positivity bias, because I'm rereading this, and it needs more than one reading. That's for sure. I've read it once and I'm reading it through again. It's very comforting to have a very positive outlook on life. It's amazing how it changes changes how you feel about things. I'm beginning to understand a different way.
Real world Torah. It's someone who embodied Torah incarnate, how they applied it to life in a certain way. That's what it comes down. That's what the Rebbe represents. The Rebbe is Torah, spirituality, embodiment, as a human being could, as much as a human being could, but with practical application in the deepest way. And that's why we're unpacking the Rebbe today, because I know there's a lot to to learn about that practical application.
Yeah, so I recommend anybody who's on this.
The book is Positivity Bias by Mendel Kalmanson. If you don't know, it can be bought on Amazon. Yeah. Incidentally, personal connection. Mendel Kalmanson was my bunkmate in teen camp.
Interesting.
Just saying, we're the same age. He surpassed all of us in his writing. But it's a small world in Chabad.
The vignettes are wonderful. It actually makes the point that the Rebbe makes, about being positive. And there are things that I don't think you could ever be positive about. The Rebbe finds a way to do that. And I think it's incredible. It's life changing and life affirming. So I suggest, if you're feeling a little down because of what's going on in the world, read the Positivity Bias. I think you'll feel a whole lot better.
I'll put it in the comments in the YouTube video. So
okay.
All right. Good. Well, not good Shabbos. Good Shavua Tov, and hopefully see you this coming Friday as well.
Friday or Thursday. Well, Thursday at 3:30.